It was a rainy Tuesday in Seattle. I remember the gray sky pressing down on me as I sat in my car outside my apartment, the engine off, the silence deafening. My hands gripped the steering wheel, not out of necessity, but because I needed something to hold on to, something to anchor me in a world that felt like it was spinning out of control. I had just left another meeting where I felt invisible, my ideas dismissed, my presence barely acknowledged. This wasn't new, it was a pattern. At 32, I was stuck in a job that drained me, relationships that felt superficial, and a life that seemed to be on autopilot. I was surviving, not living. I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror, searching for the person I used to be, the one with dreams, passion, and a sense of purpose. But all I saw was a stranger, worn down by the weight of unmet expectations and unfulfilled potential. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake, my mind racing with questions. Is this all there is? Why do I feel so disconnected? How did I get here? The silence of the night was interrupted only by the occasional sound of rain tapping against the window, a melancholic rhythm that mirrored my internal turmoil. The next morning, I dragged myself to the local coffee shop, hoping that a change of scenery might offer some solace. As I sipped my coffee, I noticed an older man sitting alone, engrossed in a book titled The Psychology of Self-Improvement. The title caught my eye, and before I could second-guess myself, I approached him. "Excuse me," I said hesitantly. "I couldn't help but notice your book. I've been feeling lost lately, and I'm not sure where to start." He looked up, his eyes kind and understanding. "Ah, the journey inward," he said with a gentle smile. "It's the most challenging and rewarding path one can take." "I'm Gabriel." We talked for hours. Gabriel shared his own story of feeling adrift in his younger years and how he discovered the principles that transformed his life. He spoke of self-awareness, the power of habits, and the importance of aligning actions with values. "Change doesn't happen overnight," he said, "but with consistent effort and the right mindset, transformation is possible." He continuously guided me in following steps. Step 3. Awareness is the first step. It was around this time Gabriel asked me a question that stopped me in my tracks. We were sitting on a bench overlooking the city skyline one evening when he turned to me and said, "What's the voice in your head saying right now?" I chuckled awkwardly and replied, "Probably something like, 'This is a weird question.'" He nodded and smiled. "Exactly, but think deeper. That voice. It runs your life more than you think." This conversation led us into one of the most life-changing topics I had ever encountered: self-talk. The way I spoke to myself internally was something I had never consciously considered. Yet once Gabriel explained it, everything clicked. We don't just narrate our lives internally, we shape them. Every negative statement like, "I'm not good enough," or "I always fail," was reinforcing the belief system that held me back. Gabriel introduced me to the concept of cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, a widely used psychological approach developed in the UK and the US, which focuses on challenging and changing unhelpful cognitive distortions and behaviors. He gave me a basic but powerful exercise: write down my negative thoughts and counter them with evidence-based positive affirmations. For instance, one of my recurring thoughts was, "I'm terrible at sticking to routines." Gabriel taught me to write this down and then write a counterstatement. I've stuck to routines before, like my gym schedule last summer. I just need the right structure. The results were subtle at first, but gradually I found myself thinking differently. When I woke up late or missed a task, instead of spiraling into self-criticism, I learned to respond with, "I slipped today, but I can start fresh now." This simple shift started to rebuild my confidence. Gabriel often quoted a famous line from Winston Churchill: "The positive thinker sees the invisible, feels the intangible, and achieves the impossible." It struck a chord. I started seeing how the great minds of history, Churchill in Britain, Martin Luther King Jr. in the US, and even Catherine Booth, co-founder of the Salvation Army, used optimism and positive self-talk to energize not just themselves, but whole movements. I also stumbled upon a study conducted by the University of Pennsylvania, which found that optimistic people had significantly better outcomes in health, career, and relationships. The researchers concluded that positive self-talk builds psychological resilience, which then spills into every area of life. To make this practice a habit, Gabriel helped me build a morning routine. I'd spend 10 minutes journaling, writing down any negative self-beliefs and countering them with evidence and encouragement. It was a small step, but its ripple effects were immense. I remember the first time I truly noticed a shift. I had missed a deadline at work and expected my usual flood of anxiety and guilt. But instead, I heard myself think, "This was one moment. I'll handle the consequences and plan better next time." It was like I had developed an inner coach, someone rooting for me instead of tearing me down. Even when small setbacks came and I faced them with a new mindset. When I received critical feedback on a presentation, my first instinct was still to shrink. But then I heard that inner voice, now reprogrammed: "You're learning. This is how growth looks." Step by step, thought by thought, I was becoming someone different, someone I actually liked. Gabriel always said, "The mind is like a garden. Whatever you water grows." Self-talk, I realized, was the watering can. And for the first time, I was feeding my soul instead of starving it. But Gabriel didn't stop there. One evening, he handed me a small booklet titled "The Warrior's Way," written by a Vietnam War veteran from the US, who had survived PTSD and found healing through mastering his inner dialogue. In it, the veteran described how awareness of his inner critic was the first battle, naming the enemy before fighting it. That idea resonated deeply with me. The active awareness of hearing, identifying, and labeling the inner voice was the starting point of transformation. I began labeling my inner voices. I named the negative one doubt, and the encouraging one growth. Whenever I caught myself saying something defeating, I'd whisper, "Doubt's speaking." It gave me power suddenly. I wasn't the voice. I was the observer of the voice. And that changed everything. From the old cultures too, like the Stoics of ancient Rome, came the same wisdom. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This teaching, centuries old, echoed what modern psychology teaches today, that awareness is the birthplace of change. And it's true. I didn't wake up one day completely transformed. But by practicing awareness, by hearing the voice before believing it, I gradually rewired my reactions. And as I did, my world changed from the inside out. That's when I realized awareness isn't just the beginning of self-improvement. It's the doorway to everything else. Step 4. Rewiring the mind. Gabriel once told me, your mind isn't a jail, it's a workshop, and every thought is a tool. At first, I didn't get it, but he explained it with a metaphor I'll never forget. Imagine your thoughts are paths in a forest, he said. Every time you think something, especially if it's repeated, it's like walking down a trail. Eventually, that trail becomes clearer, easier to walk, and automatic. But the catch is, most of us are walking down negative trails without even knowing it. That image hit me hard. I'd spent years deepening the path of self-doubt, comparison, and overthinking. If I wanted to change, I had to create new mental paths, and that's what rewiring the mind was all about. Gabriel introduced me to the science behind it, neuroplasticity. It's the brain's ability to rewire itself based on repeated experiences and thoughts. He showed me a TED Talk by Dr. Lara Boyd from Canada, who explained that our brains are constantly being shaped by what we practice, and that includes mental habits. The practical application. I had to begin practicing new thought patterns, just like someone would train a muscle. Instead of saying, I can't handle this, I started replacing it with, this is tough, but I'm learning. At first, it felt forced, but day by day, it started to stick. Gabriel encouraged me to use visual cues too. I placed sticky notes with positive affirmations on my bathroom mirror and set reminders on my phone. One said, your thoughts create your reality. Another, choose the empowering path. Over time, those cues became internal voices. He also shared a powerful story from the US stat of Jim Carrey. Before he became a Hollywood icon, Carrey famously wrote himself a $10 million check for acting services rendered and dated it for 5 years in the future. He kept it in his wallet and visualized that future every single day. Years later, he received that exact amount for Dumb and Dumber. It wasn't magic, it was focused mental rewiring in action. Across the pond in the UK, Gabriel introduced me to the story of J.K. Rowling before she became the world's most successful author. She battled depression, lived on welfare, and had a series of rejections from publishers. But what made her remarkable wasn't her circumstances, it was her mindset. She kept writing, kept believing. Rock bottom, she once said, became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life. In Australia, the story of Nick Vujicic is equally stirring. Born without arms or legs, Nick went through intense emotional struggles. But through positive mental rewiring and unshakable faith, he became a world-renowned motivational speaker. He often shares how gratitude, perspective shifting, and faith in God helped reprogram his mind for resilience and joy. Gabriel's method was simple but transformative. He taught me to use a 3-step daily exercise. 1. Catch a negative or limiting thought. 2. Challenge it by questioning its truth. 3. Change it with an empowering replacement. One day, I caught myself thinking, I'll never be as confident as others. I challenged it, is that true? I remembered times I had spoken up in meetings or helped friends through problems. I changed it to, I am learning to show up confidently, one step at a time. Another tool that made a huge difference was gratitude journaling. Every night, I listed 3 things I was grateful for and 1 thing I did well. Over time, it trained my brain to focus on the positive. This simple act, backed by Harvard research, has been shown to improve optimism and overall well-being. Gabriel also reminded me of ancient teachings like those of the Stoics from Greece and Rome. Epictetus wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Thousands of years later, it's still the golden key to mental mastery. Even New Zealand's All Blacks rugby team, one of the most successful in sports history, use a mental technique called red to blue. When a player's mind goes into panic or negative red mode, they consciously shift to a focused blue state by controlling breath and thoughts. It's rewiring in real time, practiced on fields and in life. Slowly, these practices began to reshape me. I still faced doubts, stress, and anxiety, but now I had tools. I could interrupt the spiral. I could choose new thoughts. And those thoughts began to shape a new version of myself, more calm, confident, and compassionate. Gabriel was right. The mind wasn't my enemy. It was my most powerful ally if I trained it. And rewiring, it wasn't about perfection. It was about practice. Step 5. Habits make or break you. Show me your habits, and I'll show you your future. Gabriel told me one foggy morning as we walked along the riverbank. That phrase, etched into my memory, sounded like a cliché at first, but as the days unfolded, I realized it held the blueprint of transformation. The truth was, I'd spent years building habits without realizing it. Not the kind that propel you forward, but the kind that quietly sabotage progress. Scrolling on my phone before bed, skipping breakfast, promising to exercise tomorrow. These small choices, made daily, created a version of me that felt stuck, tired, and unmotivated. Gabriel explained it like this: your habits are the bricks. Your life is the house. What are you building? He introduced me to James Clear's principles from his book, Atomic Habits, a bestseller across the USA, UK, and Canada. Clear wrote, "You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems." That changed how I saw everything. I realized I didn't need to overhaul my life. Overnight, I needed to change my systems, my routines, my tiny repeated actions. So, we started small. Gabriel encouraged me to build keystone habits, those that trigger a ripple effect of positive change. For me, it started with making my bed every morning. Simple, yes, but that small win set the tone for order, clarity, and pride. It spilled into other areas, cleaning my room, planning my meals, and eventually managing my time better. He shared the story of Benjamin Franklin, one of America's founding fathers, who kept a daily habit tracker in the 1700s to monitor 13 virtues, including discipline, temperance, and humility. Franklin understood that greatness isn't one grand act, it's the result of daily commitment. In the UK, British cycling coach Dave Brailsford used the aggregation of marginal gains to lead Team Sky to multiple Tour de France victories, improving every tiny habit around sleep, hygiene, and nutrition. Even Australia's Steve Irwin, though remembered for his wild energy, was consistent in his daily rituals of animal care and research. His dedication wasn't spontaneous, it was habitual. In Canada, Robin Sharma teaches the 5 a.m. club habit of rising early that has empowered entrepreneurs and athletes alike to take charge of their day. Gabriel taught me a simple 2-minute rule. If a new habit feels hard, do it for just 2 minutes. Want to read more? Just read 1 page. Want to journal? Write 1 sentence. These micro habits helped me bypass resistance and build momentum. I began each day by drinking a glass of water, stretching for 2 minutes, and reviewing my to-do list. And I tracked them. Not perfectly, but consistently. Gabriel reminded me, progress over perfection. If you miss a day, don't miss 2. That mindset shifted my relationship with failure. I didn't beat myself up anymore. I simply returned to the habit, like brushing my teeth after a skipped night. The historical wisdom echoed the same message. Aristotle once said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. In New Zealand, I found inspiration in Lydia Kao, a world-class golfer who began her practice routines as a child and maintained them with devotion. Her consistency, not just her talent, made her elite. And that became my truth, too. I didn't need to be extraordinary. I just needed to be consistent. The impact of these new habits was visible within weeks. I felt sharper, calmer, more in control. My relationships improved. My self-worth climbed. And all because I started choosing actions that supported the person I wanted to become. In the end, habits weren't just part of self-improvement. They were the path, and every small choice I made was a step toward building a life of intention, purpose, and peace. Step 6. The power of micro-wins. I once believed transformation came in lightning strikes, big decisions, life-altering events, sudden awakenings. But Gabriel smiled one afternoon as we sat by a quiet cafe and said, "The most powerful changes come from the smallest victories." He called them micro-win. A micro-win is a small, intentional act that makes you feel like a winner. It could be waking up with the first alarm, finishing a 5-minute task you've been avoiding, or walking around the block when you don't feel like exercising. These aren't grand gestures, but their impact is quietly monumental. Gabriel explained, when you string enough micro-wins together, you build momentum. You stop seeing yourself as someone who's stuck and start seeing yourself as someone who shows up. He shared the story of Admiral William H. McRaven, a former U.S. Navy SEAL and author of Make Your Bed. In his famous University of Texas commencement speech, McRaven emphasized how making your bed every morning can change your life. It's a micro-win that builds self-discipline, pride, and confidence. If you can't do the little things right, you'll never do the big things right. I began adopting this mindset. I stopped waiting for motivation and started chasing micro-wins. Brushing my teeth as soon as I woke up. Answering one email I'd been avoiding. Drinking a glass of water before my coffee. Each one gave me a sense of control, however small. In the UK, psychologist Dr. Linda Blair talks about how small, achievable goals reduce anxiety and increase self-belief. The British Journal of Health Psychology even found that breaking down tasks into micro-goals helps in habit formation and mental resilience. In Canada, I read about Terry Fox, the national hero who attempted to run across the country with a prosthetic leg to raise money for cancer research. His mindset, one step at a time, He didn't focus on the 5,000 miles ahead, he focused on the mile in front of him. That mental approach made him a legend. These examples solidified my understanding. Success isn't an avalanche, it's a snowball. I started giving myself credit for the smallest wins. Finishing a book chapter, tidying my desk, journaling 2 lines. These were seeds planted in the soil of self-worth. And over time, they bloomed. Micro wins rewired my brain for achievement. They created a positive feedback loop. Accomplishment bred motivation, which bred more accomplishment. Never underestimate the power of one good decision, Gabriel reminded me, because one win leads to the next. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't the big changes that shaped MIT, was the string of little ones. Each micro win became a stepping stone, and soon I had built a path I could proudly walk on. Step 7. The social mirror. Gabriel once told me, you can't see your own face without a mirror. And in life, people are your mirror. At first, I didn't grasp the weight of that statement. But the more I looked at my life, the more I realized how true it was. For a long time, I believed I was entirely self-made. My thoughts, actions, and identity felt like products of my own choices. But in quiet moments of reflection, I saw how deeply shaped I was by the people I surrounded myself with, their beliefs, energy, and expectations, all subtly molding my behavior. Gabriel explained what psychologists call the looking glass self, a theory by Charles Horton Cooley. It suggests we form our self-image based on how we think others perceive us. If people see us as capable, we act capable. If they expect little from us, we shrink to meet those low expectations. He had me list the 5 people I spent the most time with. Now ask yourself, he said, are these people reflections of your best self or your fears? That hit hard. I began to recognize patterns. Around friends who complained constantly, I became more negative. Around dreamers, I felt inspired. Around critics, I shrank. Around encouragers, I flourished. It wasn't just emotionally, it was scientific. Gabriel shared a Harvard study that followed 75 men for over 80 years, concluding that the quality of our relationships was the strongest predictor of long-term happiness and health. Not money, not fame, relationships. In the US, I thought of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Behind his global success is a tight circle of supportive friends, mentors, and family who grounded him, especially during his battles with depression and career failures. He speaks often about the impact of surrounding yourself with people who bring light. In the UK, author and speaker Jay Shetty talks about how he consciously stepped away from toxic environments after his time as a monk. He realized that if he wanted peace, growth, and purpose, his environment had to reflect those values. Gabriel called it curating your circle. You're the curator of your life's gallery, he said. Choose what hangs on your wall. That didn't mean abandoning people I loved, but it did mean setting boundaries, spending less time with those who drained me, and more time with those who challenged and uplifted me. I sought out people with strong character, humble hearts, and generous spirits. And gradually, I noticed a shift in myself. Even in New Zealand, Maori communities emphasize the concept of NOE, extended family and community. It's a social mirror built on mutual respect, shared identity, and deep connection. Your behavior reflects on your group and theirs on you. The social mirror becomes a system of shared accountability and encouragement. I started paying attention to who I admired and why. I followed leaders online who walked their talk. I reached out to mentors who had integrity, not just success. I attended workshops, met people who were growing, and let their mindset challenge mine. The biggest transformation came when I changed how I viewed myself through others. I stopped seeing myself as broken or behind. I began to believe I was someone worth investing in because the people I now surrounded myself with believed it too. And when I became that mirror for someone else, offering encouragement, listening without judgment, celebrating small wins, I realized how powerful this feedback loop could be. The world shows you who you are every day, Gabriel told me, but you get to choose which reflections to believe. That lesson changed everything. It taught me that the people in our lives don't just influence us, they define us. And by choosing who we let in, we take back the brush to paint our own reflection. Step 8. Emotional Mastery. Gabriel leaned back on the park bench one afternoon as I vented about an argument I had with a friend. "You're not angry because of what they said," he said gently. "You're angry because of what you haven't mastered inside yourself yet." His words didn't sit well at first. They felt too heavy, too accusatory. But deep down, I knew he was right. I had been reactive, quick to defend, and even quicker to blame. It wasn't just about the moment, it was about the storm inside me. Gabriel introduced me to the idea that emotional mastery isn't about suppression, it's about regulation and redirection. In simple terms, it means understanding your emotions, accepting them, and choosing your response instead of reacting impulsively. He shared a study from Stanford University showing that people who practice emotional regulation techniques like reframing thoughts and mindful breathing demonstrated higher productivity, better relationships, and improved mental health. Emotional intelligence, as defined by psychologist Daniel Goleman, includes self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills, and it's more predictive of success than IQ. Think of emotions like waves, Gabriel said. You can't stop them from coming, but you can learn to surf. That stuck with me. And so began my journey into emotional self-awareness. The first step was naming my emotions. It sounds simple, but it was powerful. Instead of just saying, "I feel bad," I learned to say, "I feel anxious," or "I feel frustrated," or "I feel ashamed." Naming the emotion helped me understand it and take away its power. Next, I learned to pause. When something triggered me, I practiced the 90-second rule. Emotions, like anger or fear, chemically last for about 90 seconds in the brain unless we feed them with thoughts. So I'd pause, breathe, and let the wave pass before choosing how to respond. Gabriel gave me tools, journaling, box breathing, even stepping away for a walk. He reminded me that emotional mastery isn't about never feeling, it's about not letting feelings drive the car. In the USA, Oprah Winfrey has spoken openly about her childhood trauma and emotional struggles. Her ability to rise came not just from ambition, but from learning to understand her pain, speak about it, and respond with grace rather than resentment. That's emotional mastery. In the UK, Prince Harry has broken generations of silence around mental health by admitting his own emotional battles. He could have buried them, but instead, he chose awareness, therapy, and healing. It's not weakness, it's strength in disguise. Australia's Ash Barty, the tennis champion who stepped away from the sport at her peak, spoke about how her mental and emotional well-being mattered more than trophies. That decision shocked the sports world, but it reflected a level of emotional maturity rarely seen in competitive spaces. Gabriel told me about ancient Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, who believed that while we cannot control external events, we can always control our response. Man is not disturbed by things, said Epictetus, but by the views he takes of them. That quote alone helped me shift my inner world. I started practicing emotional distancing, looking at situations from a third-person perspective. I'd ask, what advice would I give a friend in this situation? This method helped me calm down, gain clarity, and act with intention. I also learned the power of compassion toward others and myself. Instead of beating myself up over emotional outbursts, I reflected on what triggered them. And instead of judging others' reactions, I started wondering what pain they might be hiding. Over time, my relationships transformed. Arguments became conversations, triggers became teachings, and pain became fuel for growth. Emotional mastery, Gabriel said, is the quiet strength behind every great leader, every peaceful soul, and every wise heart. It's the difference between surviving and thriving. And now, as I walk through life, I don't fear my emotions. I listen to them, I learn from them, and most importantly, I no longer let them control me. Step 9. Purpose over pressure. There was a moment, a Wednesday morning, grey and quiet, when I sat at my desk, staring at the blinking cursor on my screen. I had a deadline, expectations, responsibilities, but my chest was tight, and my mind screamed, what's the point of all this? I had chased goals for years, promotions, paychecks, praise, but I couldn't shake the hollow feeling that came after each win. I was constantly under pressure to perform, to be better, to meet standards set by others, or even worse, set by a version of myself I no longer resonated with. That day, I messaged Gabriel, "Why do I feel exhausted even when I'm succeeding?" His reply came quick, "Because you're living under pressure, not purpose." When we met later that day, Gabriel explained something that reshaped the lens through which I saw my entire life. Pressure comes from the outside in. Purpose comes from the inside out. When you move through life only reacting to pressure, you become a puppet to other people's expectations. But when you find your purpose, you become a force of your own. He shared a powerful story from the United States, that of Fred Rogers, or Mr. Rogers, who revolutionized children's television not for fame or ratings, but because he believed children deserved emotional education. He faced pressure from networks and critics who thought his slow, thoughtful style wouldn't work. But his purpose kept him steady. Today, he's celebrated as a quiet hero who healed generations, not because he followed trends, but because he followed purpose. In Australia, Nick Vujicic, born without arms or legs, turned what most would call a tragic limitation into a life of meaning. He faced unimaginable pressure, social ridicule, internal despair, but found purpose in speaking, inspiring millions around the world. When you can't get a miracle, be one, he often says. Gabriel encouraged me to do an exercise that night. Write down what matters to you deeply, personally. Not what impresses people. What fulfills you, I wrote. Helping others feel seen. Telling stories that change lives. Growing into someone I'd admire. That list became my compass. Suddenly, the pressure to be perfect, to achieve endlessly, began to lose its grip. I didn't have to run in circles anymore. I had direction. Gabriel helped me understand that when we attach our identity to performance, we become fragile. A failure becomes, I'm a failure. A setback becomes, I'm not enough. But when we operate from purpose, failures are data, not definitions. Setbacks are redirections, not rejections. He shared how Winston Churchill, former UK Prime Minister, faced wave after wave of political loss before leading Britain through World War II. His secret, a sense of destiny rooted in service and resilience. Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. In Canada, I was moved by the story of Clara Hughes, Olympic medalist in both summer and winter games. Her athletic career was marked not just by medals, but by depression. Yet, her purpose led her to become a leading voice for mental health awareness. She once said, "My results didn't define me. My reason did." With purpose as my guide, I began reshaping my daily actions. I stopped saying yes to everything that stressed me out. I said yes to what aligned with who I wanted to be. I still worked hard, still faced deadlines, but it wasn't pressure that pushed. MIT was passion that pulled me. There's a difference. Gabriel gave me one final thought that night. When pressure weighs on you, you shrink. When purpose lives in you, you rise. Now, every time I feel the anxiety of not doing enough, I return to my list. I remind myself, I'm not here to impress. I'm here to impact. And slowly, the weight lifts, and I walk taller, lighter, free. Step 10. Leading from within. I always believed leaders were the loudest voices in the room, the ones with titles, status, or crowds following them. But Gabriel shattered that belief with a single sentence. True leadership begins long before anyone is watching. It happened on a quiet evening as we strolled through the park. I had just told him about a work meeting where my ideas were dismissed. Maybe I'm just not cut out for leadership, I confessed. Gabriel stopped walking. Leadership, he said gently, isn't about being in charge. It's about being in control of yourself. He explained something I've never forgotten. The greatest leaders are led by something within. Not approval, not applause, but values, vision, integrity. To bring this home, he told me the story of Nelson Mandela. Though not from an English-speaking country, Mandela's example is deeply cherished in the UK, the US, and worldwide. He led from a prison cell before he ever led a nation. His quiet resilience, unwavering principles, and commitment to peace even toward those who oppressed him made him a beacon of moral leadership. But you don't need to change a nation, Gabriel said. Change a moment. That's where true leadership begins. He pointed me toward Jacinda Ardern, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand. During crisis weather, it was the Christchurch mosque shootings or the COVID-19 Pandemic leadership wasn't marked by political theatrics, but by calm, empathy, and transparent communication. She embodied leading from within, making decisions guided by principle, not pressure. I started seeing my own life differently. I realized that every time I chose patience when anger was easier, I was leading. Every time I showed kindness, even when unnoticed, I was leading. Every time I stayed true to my values when no one was watching, I was leading from within. Gabriel encouraged me to focus on character-led leaderships, something timeless and respected across every culture and religion. He spoke of Jesus Christ, who led not through command, but through compassion, humility, and sacrifice. Washing the feet of his disciples, he modeled servant leadership, a concept that echoes in modern leadership theories taught across universities in Canada, Australia, and the US. I began applying this in small ways, listening deeply in conversations, showing up early, keeping promises, even the small ones. At work, I stopped waiting for recognition. I started offering it instead. I mentored a younger colleague, shared credit generously, and made space for others to speak. In the UK, I drew inspiration from Captain Tom Moore, the 100-year-old veteran who raised millions for the NHS during the pandemic just by walking in his garden. No fame, no platform, just quiet conviction. His example reminded me, you don't need permission to be a leader, just purpose. Gabriel left me with one final challenge. Don't lead to be seen. Lead so others can see better. Now, when I wake up each morning, I ask myself not who will notice me today, but who can I help notice themselves? Leading from within has changed my relationships, my self-worth, and my mission in life. And it all started not by standing above others, but by standing firmly in who I am. Step 11. The Quiet Revolution. One evening, Gabriel and I were sitting in a small bookstore cafe. The rain tapped against the window, and the air smelled of paper and roasted coffee beans. I was recounting all the changes I had made, the habits, the mindset shifts, the micro wins. But does it matter? I asked him. Does all this inner work really change the world? Gabriel looked up from his tea and smiled. Let me tell you about revolutions, the quiet kind. He explained that history has two types of revolutions: the loud ones, filled with marches, speeches, and uproar, and the quiet ones, those that start in kitchens, classrooms, offices, and hearts. These don't make headlines, they make character. He told me about Fred Rogers, a soft-spoken TV host from the USA, with nothing but a cardigan, puppets, and gentle words. Mr. Rogers led one of the quietest revolutions in American history, teaching children kindness, emotional awareness, and dignity through a screen. No controversy, no chaos, just compassion. Then Gabriel mentioned William Wilberforce, a British politician from the 1800s, who fought for decades to end the transatlantic slave trade. He didn't storm gates or stage riots. He worked through laws, language, and relentless moral courage. It took years, but he succeeded, and it changed the course of history. You see, Gabriel said, you may not change the world by shouting at it, but you might just shift it by being unshakably good in a world that often forgets what that means. That stayed with me. In Canada, I learned about Clara Hughes, a 6-time Olympic medalist who used her platform not for fame, but to advocate for mental health. Her candid honesty and vulnerability helped countless others speak up and heal. She started a conversation that rippled through families and communities, quietly but powerfully. And in Australia, there's the story of Rosie Batty, who after losing her son to domestic violence, became a fierce advocate for victims' rights. Her strength didn't come from rage, but from relentless love. Her personal tragedy became a national wake-up call, not by force, but through her calm, unwavering voice. Gabriel leaned in and said, "Most people think they need a stage to start a revolution. But sometimes the revolution begins when one person chooses to live differently." That was my turning point. I started seeing my life not just as personal growth, but as service. Each time I chose patience instead of anger, honesty over hiding, generosity over greed, I was starting a quiet revolution. In my home, in my friendships, in my workplace, I remembered the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who once said, "The best among you is the one who is best to his family, not the most pious in public, but the most consistent in private." His life was a masterclass in quiet revolution, transforming the harshest of societies through compassion, justice, and character. And in the Bible, Jesus taught that the kingdom of heaven is like yeast, indocile, hidden, but transformational. True change, he reminded us, doesn't always come with thunder. Sometimes it's the whisper of goodness that alters everything. So I began to live with this question in mind. What kind of revolution am I creating? Transforming the harshest of societies through compassion, justice, and character. And in the Bible, Jesus taught that the kingdom of heaven is like yeast in dough, hidden but transformational. True change, he reminded us, doesn't always come with thunder. Sometimes it's the whisper of goodness that alters everything. So I began to live with this question in mind. What kind of revolution am I creating? As I sit here writing these final reflections, a gentle breeze flows through the open window beside me. It smells like rain and renewal, the same way my life now feels cleansed, open, and full of meaning. This journey started not with grand ambition, but with quiet desperation. I felt stuck, unsure, lost in a blur of habits and voices that weren't really mine. But piece by piece, with Gabriel's guidance and the wisdom of those who walked before me, I stitched together a new identity. Not someone perfect, not someone with all the answers, but someone intentional, someone awake. I learned that self-improvement is not a selfish act, it's a sacred one. Because when you heal yourself, you soften the world around you. When you become whole, you give others permission to do the same. Your growth doesn't end with you, it echoes. From micro wins to emotional mastery. From rewiring old beliefs to understanding the power of purpose. Step in this story wasn't just a chapter in a book. It was a portal into a new way of living, one that's deeply personal and quietly powerful. Gabriel once told me, true transformation isn't when the world applauds you. It's when you look in the mirror and finally recognize the person staring back. And now, I do. I recognize someone who no longer chases validation, but builds value. Someone who doesn't break at failure, but bends toward learning. Someone who doesn't just exist, but leads heaven if it's only through the way they show up for themselves each day. If you've made it this far, Maybe you're on the edge of your own quiet revolution. Maybe there's a voice inside you whispering, there's more to life than this. And maybe, just maybe, that voice isn't asking you to become someone new, but to return to who you truly were before the noise. So start with one step, one habit, one win, one act of courage. The rest will come. Because this isn't just my story, it's yours too. The journey to self-improvement isn't loud, but it is life-changing, and it starts now.